Hello, this is James with a new story on my author channel. I hope you enjoy my story. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.
My brother was their golden boy, a prodigy lauded at every turn, while I was simply the collateral damage of their unwavering favoritism, a fact that nearly broke me before it finally set me free. My name is Olivia, and at 19, I've spent my entire life eclipsed by my brother. Leo, who is 2 years my senior, was infallible in our parents' estimation. He was their prized son, a mathematical prodigy who effortlessly conquered Olympiads, often returning home with gleaming medals and effusive praise, whereas I needed to dedicate countless hours to my studies just to keep my grades respectable. The disparity wasn't just evident in their words, it permeated every aspect of our lives. For Leo's 16th birthday, he received a sleek, new vehicle, a crimson sports car that gleamed under the driveway lights, a symbol of their pride. 2 years later, on my own 16th, I was given a marked-down bicycle, its gears stiff and paint chipped in places, a clear hand-me-down from the store's forgotten corner. I can still recall feigning gratitude with a tight smile, the forced cheer masking a deep, devastating ache in my chest. It wasn't just the big gifts either. It was the way my mother would bake Leo's favorite triple chocolate cake for his half-birthdays, while mine passed with a simple, store-bought dessert. Or how my father would spend hours helping Leo with complex physics problems, yet barely glanced at my history essays. The only individual who ever made me feel truly seen, truly cherished, was my grandmother. She possessed a rare ability to cut through the noise of my parents' bias and acknowledge me as an individual. She never forgot a birthday, always slipped me a crisp $50 bill whenever we met, and, most importantly, pledged to support me financially when I began college. That pledge was my lifeline throughout high school, a beacon of hope in the often dark landscape of my family life. It fueled my late-night study sessions and pushed me to achieve, knowing there was a way out. I gained acceptance to a university in a different city with a partial scholarship and moved into the student dormitories, brimming with a cautious optimism for a fresh start. I anticipated that my grandmother would send the promised funds, but weeks bled into months, and no money arrived. My phone bill piled up, my meal plan dwindled, and a knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. When I finally gathered the courage to question my mother about it, her response was a brutal shriek through the phone. "How could you be so selfish, Olivia?" she'd screeched, her voice laced with venom. "Your grandmother is facing financial difficulties right now. You ought to be ashamed for even asking. Get a job instead of begging." The line went dead, leaving me with a dialed tone and a profound sense of abandonment. So that's precisely what I did. I found work at a bustling coffee shop, the Daily Grind, conveniently located near my campus. The aroma of roasted beans and the constant hum of conversation became my new reality. It helped with my food situation somewhat, as they occasionally provided free, albeit day-old, pastries and allowed staff to purchase yesterday's sandwiches at a steep discount. But it was never enough. My stomach often grumbled louder than the espresso machine. It wasn't nearly enough to cover all my living costs, rent for the tiny dorm room, textbooks, supplies, even basic toiletries. So I took on a second job crafting online content for various websites, often churning out hundreds of words on obscure topics late into the night. Juggling two demanding jobs and a full-course load left me with barely any time for sleep, my days blurring into an exhausting cycle of classes, work, and desperate study. Even with dual employment, I was constantly scraping by, a perpetual state of hunger and fatigue becoming my unwelcome companions. There were periods when the cafe would close for holidays or maintenance, plunging me into a deeper financial abyss. On one particularly brutal occasion, it was shut for a full week for a deep cleaning and system overhaul. That week felt like an eternity. By the third day, I was so lightheaded and weak from lack of food that I nearly fainted during a lecture, the words on the professor's slides blurring before my eyes. My roommate, Chloe, a vibrant and compassionate girl from upstate New York, came to my rescue. She noticed my dwindling energy and the desperate look in my eyes. "Liv, seriously, are you eating enough?" she'd asked one evening, her brow furrowed with concern. When I finally broke down and confessed, she didn't hesitate. Without a word, she shared her packed lunch, a homemade turkey sandwich and apple slices, insisting I take the larger half. She even pressed a $20 bill into my hand, making me promise to buy something substantial. Her quiet generosity was a balm to my aching soul. Then disaster struck. My ancient laptop, a hand-me-down from a distant cousin, finally gave up the ghost with a sputtering groan and a puff of smoke. I was inconsolable. It wasn't just a device. It was my lifeline, my primary tool for both my content writing job and all my school assignments. Without it, both my income and my grades would plummet. I stared at the dead screen, tears streaming down my face, utterly hopeless. I had no funds for repairs, no credit card, no one to turn to. Once again, Chloe was there for me. She watched me cry for an hour, then simply said, "My parents would help. Let me ask them." The next day, she borrowed $500 from her parents and handed it to me, no questions asked, just a gentle squeeze of my arm. I meticulously recorded every dollar in a small, worn notebook, resolute in my intention to repay her down to the last cent. Her unwavering friendship became another vital anchor in my tumultuous life. Meanwhile, my brother was supposedly flourishing at his university, at least according to my parents. They painted a picture of a dedicated, brilliant scholar, so engrossed in his studies and demanding exams that he couldn't even attend family functions. Their pride in him remained undiminished, even from afar. I had very little direct contact with him, just the rare, terse text message where he seemed aloof and evasive about his life, often ending conversations abruptly with an excuse about an upcoming big project or study session. This was the strange, uncomfortable state of affairs until last weekend, when I took a 4-hour bus ride to my hometown to celebrate my grandmother's milestone birthday. The bus journey was long and uncomfortable, but the thought of seeing Grandma filled me with anticipation. My wallet was nearly empty after purchasing a modest but heartfelt gift for her, a framed picture of the two of us from my high school graduation, taken in a rare moment of unguarded joy. When I finally reached my grandmother's charming, old house, the celebration was already in full swing. The familiar scent of her famous roast chicken and freshly baked apple pie filled the air. My parents were present, their usual beaming selves, along with a lively assortment of various aunts, uncles, and cousins, their chatter filling every room. The only one conspicuously absent was Leo. "Where's Leo?" I inquired after a brief, somewhat stiff hug with my mother, who barely met my eyes. "Oh, he's just overwhelmed with exam preparation," my dad replied hastily, a forced smile plastered on his face. "He sends his regards. You know how demanding his program is." Grandma's dining table was laden with an abundance of food, platters piled high with glistening roast chicken, creamy mashed potatoes, crisp green beans, a rich mushroom gravy, and several homemade desserts. It was more food than I had seen in months, a veritable feast. My stomach rumbled audibly, a mortifying sound, as I found a seat amongst my cousins, trying to appear nonchalant as I heaped my plate with as much as I dared. We began with heartfelt toasts, each person taking a turn to extol Grandma's profound wisdom, boundless kindness, and unwavering generosity. Afterward, the conversation fragmented into smaller groups as we ate, the clinking of silverware and murmuring voices filling the room. I was quietly savoring my meal, each bite a small victory against the gnawing hunger, when my cousin, Dylan, a perceptive and blunt individual, addressed me from across the table. "Wow, Olivia, you're so gaunt. You've lost a significant amount of weight," he declared, his voice cutting through the general chatter, loud enough for everyone to overhear. A hush fell over our immediate section of the table. Before I could formulate a coherent response, my mother, ever quick to control the narrative, interjected smoothly. "Oh, you know how these college girls are with their fashionable diets. She's probably on that intermittent fasting trend or some new juice cleanse." I opened my mouth, a retort ready on my tongue, wanting to scream the truth, but my grandmother spoke first. Her voice, usually soft and melodious, held an unexpected edge of steel. "Dylan is right. Olivia, you're far too thin. Your cheeks are hollow, and you look exhausted." Her eyes, usually sparkling with warmth, narrowed in genuine concern as they fixed on me. "Isn't the $1,500 I send you each month sufficient for your food expenses?" The fork, heavy with a mouthful of potatoes, slipped from my suddenly numb grasp and clattered loudly onto my plate, the sound echoing in the sudden, profound silence that descended upon the dining room. My heart hammered against my ribs. "What money?" I managed to ask, my voice a mere whisper, barely audible above the ringing in my ears. "Grandma, I haven't gotten any money from you. Not a single cent since I started college." The silence in the room intensified, growing thick with unspoken accusations as all eyes darted frantically between me and my parents, who had both turned a sickly shade of white. A collective gasp rippled through the gathered relatives. "Richard, Eleanor," Grandma said, her voice dangerously quiet, a storm brewing beneath the calm surface, as she addressed my parents directly. "Would you be so kind as to explain?" My mother's lips quivered, her eyes wide with panic. "Mother, this is a delicate matter. Perhaps we shouldn't air this in front of everybody. It's a private family issue." "I have nothing to be ashamed of," Grandma retorted sharply, her gaze unwavering, fixed like a laser on my parents. "Explain what you did with Olivia's money. And if you don't tell us everything, the unvarnished truth, this instant, I am calling the authorities. I will not have my granddaughter suffer because of your deceit." My mother dissolved into dramatic, theatrical tears, burying her face in her hands. My father cleared his throat, avoiding eye contact, and stared intently at his clasped hands on the table, looking utterly defeated. We've been using the money for Leo," he confessed, his voice barely audible, a pathetic whimper. "He has a gambling addiction. He fell in with the wrong crowd in high school, and it just got worse at college. We've tried everything, therapists, expensive clinics, special programs, but he keeps relapsing. It's a disease, Mother." As my father continued his halting, desperate explanation to my grandmother, my thoughts reeled back through my entire childhood, all the instances where Leo got everything he desired, from the latest gaming console to lavish vacations, all the times I was told to be more like him, to strive for his effortless perfection, all the endless nights I had gone hungry while working 2 jobs, scraping pennies together, believing my grandmother had forgotten her promise, believing I was truly alone. The betrayal was a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. Grandma's voice, now laced with a cold fury I'd never heard before, pierced through the tense, suffocating atmosphere. "Everyone, please go on enjoying the party without me." She rose to her feet, her expression a mask of restrained rage, her eyes blazing with an intensity that silenced every last murmur. "Richard, Eleanor. My office. Now." My parents trailed after her, their shoulders slumped like reprimanded children, their faces pale and drawn. I remained frozen in my seat, barely registering the stilted, awkward small talk that hesitantly resumed around me. My cousin Dylan, who had started this unraveling, gently patted my shoulder and whispered, "Are you all right, Liv?" But I couldn't even manage a nod. The room felt like it was spinning. I mumbled an excuse and crept into the hallway, desperate for air. The door to Grandma's office was shut, a thick barrier separating me from the truth. I pressed my ear against it, desperate to decipher the conversation. The voices were too low, muffled, which was somehow more unnerving than outright shouting. I could only catch fragmented words and phrases. Years of lying and deception. From Grandma's sharp voice, "We only tried to help him, Mother." In my dad's desperate, pleading tone, and "No excuse for this betrayal." From Grandma again, her words like hammer blows. I went back to my chair, pushing the untouched food around my plate, my mind a chaotic whirlwind of shock, anger, and profound sadness. 30 minutes later, which felt like an eternity, my parents emerged from the office. My mother's eyes were red and swollen, her face a blotchy mess. My father's usually confident demeanor was utterly shattered. They spoke to no one, their gazes fixed on the floor, simply collecting their coats from the hooks by the door and departing without a single goodbye. 5 minutes after that, Grandma reappeared, a strained, almost brittle smile on her face. "Who is ready for cake?" she announced, her voice surprisingly steady, as if nothing remotely dramatic had just transpired. The party proceeded awkwardly, with guests feigning ignorance of the massive, explosive issue that had just been exposed, their polite smiles barely concealing their discomfort. Once the final guest had left, their cars pulling away into the night, Grandma took my hand. Her grip was firm, grounding. "Olivia, I don't think you should return home tonight. Stay here with me for a few days." I nodded, a wave of profound relief washing over me. The mere thought of confronting my parents, of being under the same roof as them, made me feel physically sick to my stomach. The following morning, Grandma sat me down at her sun-drenched kitchen table with a steaming cup of coffee cradled in my hands. Her eyes were weary, etched with a deep sorrow, but her voice was firm, resolute. "I need to tell you everything I learned from your parents yesterday, Olivia. Every sordid detail." She took a slow, fortifying sip of her coffee. "I never paid for your or Leo's tuition directly. I gave the money to your parents because I had faith in them, blind faith, it seems. I didn't want the hassle of bank transfers. It seemed too complicated for someone my age, and they insisted they could handle it." She paused, her gaze steady and unwavering. "You received a partial scholarship to your university, covering a significant portion. Instead of the $100,000 I allocated specifically for your education, it only cost $40,000. They pocketed the remaining $60,000 and used it on Leo for his supposed college expenses." My hands began to shake violently around my mug, the hot coffee threatening to slosh over the rim. "There's more," Grandma said, looking me directly in the eyes, her voice softening slightly. "Leo never attended college. Not a single day." "What?" I nearly spilled my coffee, the shock sending a jolt through me. "But they always said all those exams, all those projects." After high school, they sent him to Meadow Creek, a small town an hour away, supposedly to distance him from his gambling associates and the bad influences he'd cultivated here. They believed a new environment, a fresh start, would help him. She shook her head, a sigh escaping her lips. "It didn't. He just found new friends with the same destructive habits, new ways to gamble online. He barely left his room. So, all those times they said he was busy with exams." My voice was barely a whisper. Lies. All of it. Fabricated excuses to keep you away, to keep me from questioning. I also gave them another $80,000 for his education, Grandma stated, her knuckles white around her mug as she gripped it tightly. On top of the monthly allowance of $1,500 I've been sending for you for nearly 2 years now, money that never reached you, money they siphoned away for his debts. I felt a profound wave of nausea wash over me, a sickening lurch in my stomach. I had no idea. I thought Leo was in college this entire time. I mean, whenever I was home for a visit, he was always on his computer. I just assumed he was studying, working hard. He was gambling online. Grandma's voice was devoid of emotion, a stark, painful truth. Your parents have been settling his mounting debts, paying for expensive rehab programs, and funding a string of therapists. Nothing has succeeded, Olivia. Nothing has changed. Hot tears streamed down my face, blurring my vision. All this time, I've been working 2 jobs, constantly exhausted, constantly hungry. There were weeks I couldn't afford to eat, subsisting on stale pastries and instant noodles. My roommate, Chloe, had to lend me money when my laptop died, sacrificing her own savings for me. I know, sweetheart. Grandma reached out and squeezed my hand, her touch a comforting anchor. And I am profoundly sorry. I should have checked in with you myself, directly. I let my trust in them blind me. What happens now? I asked, wiping my tears with the back of my hand. You continue your studies. That is your job now, your absolute priority, she said firmly, her eyes burning with renewed purpose. And from this point forward, I will be transferring $2,000 directly into your bank account every month. No more intermediaries. No more trust in those who betrayed it. I stayed with my grandmother for 3 more days, days that felt like a healing balm. We talked at length about my classes, my friends, my aspirations for the future. For the first time in years, I felt like someone was truly listening to me, truly seeing me beyond the shadow of my brother. My parents called multiple times, their names flashing on Grandma's caller ID, but Grandma informed them, unequivocally, that I wasn't prepared to speak with them. I wasn't sure if I ever would be. When it was time for me to go back to college, Grandma drove me to the bus station, her presence a comforting shield. As we bid farewell, she pressed a thick, sealed envelope into my hand. Emergency fund, she said, her eyes twinkling mischievously. And don't you dare try to give it back. Inside, I later found, were 10 crisp $100 bills. Back at school, my life transformed almost overnight. The weight of constant anxiety lifted, replaced by a lightness I hadn't known was possible. The first thing I did was quit my exhausting content writing job. With the stable, generous funds from Grandma, I could finally concentrate fully on my schoolwork and just work at the cafe on weekends, a job I actually enjoyed for its social aspect and the free coffee. I bought new clothes, not designer, but clean, well-fitting, and new. I filled my mini fridge with actual food, fresh fruits, vegetables, yogurt, and real meals. I repaid every single cent I owed Chloe, a moment of immense satisfaction. For the first time since enrolling in college, I wasn't in a constant state of exhaustion and hunger. My grades, which had hovered precariously, shot up dramatically. I even joined a study group for my toughest class, something I would never have had the time or energy for before. It felt like stepping out of a suffocating, dark cellar into the brilliant, life-giving sunshine. I started sleeping 8 hours a night, waking up refreshed, and even found time to go for runs around campus, something I used to dream about. 2 months later, I was deeply engrossed in studying in the campus library, surrounded by towering shelves of books, when someone gently tapped me on the shoulder. I looked up, startled, to see my grandmother standing there, a wide, mischievous grin on her face. "Surprise inspection," she announced, her voice a little too loud, earning a stern, shushing look from the librarian. "Grandma." I leaped up, abandoning my textbooks, and threw my arms around her, hugging her tightly. "What are you doing here?" "I thought you were back home." "Just ensuring that at least one of my grandchildren is actually attending college," she winked, her eyes twinkling with humor and a touch of sadness. "Come on, let's go get some lunch. I have something rather important to tell you." Over sandwiches and iced tea at a bustling campus cafe, Grandma dropped another bombshell, her tone remarkably nonchalant, as if discussing the weather. "I've revised my will," she said, taking a bite of her club sandwich. "You are now my sole heir." I nearly choked on my iced tea, coughing violently. "What?" "Grandma, why?" "Your parents have already received more than $250,000 from me over the years, Olivia. Not just the education funds, but other loans and investments they claimed were for them. That is their inheritance in full," she explained, her voice firm. "I have notified them of my decision. They were not pleased, to put it mildly, but frankly, I don't care about their displeasure anymore. My money, my choice." "Grandma, I don't need." I started, feeling overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of her generosity. "This isn't about need, Olivia. It's about trust. It's about recognizing character. I trust you to use what I leave behind judiciously, to make something good of it, to help others if you so choose." She looked at me with immense pride, her gaze warm and steady. "You have navigated hardship with remarkable grace and resilience, and that speaks volumes about your character. You deserve this, darling." I was utterly at a loss for words. After years of being the overlooked child, the one who never quite measured up, the forgotten daughter, I was suddenly being seen, valued, and entrusted with such a profound responsibility. It was overwhelming, a tidal wave of emotion. "Thank you," I finally managed to say, my voice thick with tears. "Don't thank me just yet." Grandma's expression grew serious, a flicker of warning in her eyes. "Your parents may try to pressure you about this. They may come to you. Be ready, Olivia. Stand your ground." She was right. A week later, my mom and dad appeared at my dorm room door unannounced, their faces grim and strained. Chloe took one glance at their desperate, calculating expressions and quickly made an excuse about a pressing study session, discreetly leaving me alone with them. "We need to talk, Olivia," my dad said, perching awkwardly on my desk chair, looking uncomfortable and out of place, while my mom sat stiffly on Chloe's bed. I looked at my parents, these familiar strangers in my personal space. My mom seemed thinner, her face gaunt, with dark circles under her eyes, her usually meticulous hair slightly disheveled. Dad's hair looked grayer, his shoulders slumped. "What do you want?" I asked, my tone colder, harder than I had intended, a defensive wall instinctively rising around me. Mom leaned forward, her voice a desperate plea. "We need you to talk to your grandmother about the will, Olivia. To reconsider."
"No." Just like that.
A single, decisive word. Not even a hello, not an apology, not a glimmer of regret, just straight to their thinly veiled request. Why would I do that? I crossed my arms, refusing to give an inch. "Because we're your parents," Dad said, as if that simple fact settled the matter, as if it absolved them of all their sins. I let out a short, bitter laugh that startled even me with its raw cynicism. "That didn't seem to be a factor when you were stealing the money meant for me, did it?" My mother's eyes filled with tears again, a performance I knew all too well. "You don't comprehend what we've been through with Leo, Olivia. The burden of his addiction, the constant worry." "No, I don't, because no one ever told me anything." I retorted, my voice rising in volume, sitting on my own bed to maintain as much physical and emotional distance as possible. All I knew was that I was struggling to survive, that I was starving, working 2 miserable jobs, and still couldn't cover my expenses, while you were telling me how wonderfully Leo was doing in college. You painted him as a success story while I was literally starving. You're exaggerating, Olivia, Mom said dismissively, her voice regaining a hint of her old imperiousnness. I'm sure it wasn't that severe. You just needed to be more resourceful. Something inside me snapped. A fuse blew, years of suppressed rage exploding to the surface. Not that severe? Let me tell you what not that severe looks like, Mom. It looks like finishing leftover food from customers' plates at the cafe because I was that hungry, that desperate. It looks like wearing the same 3 outfits for 2 years because I couldn't afford new clothes. It looks like crying myself to sleep, curled up in a ball, because my laptop broke and I had no way to fix it, no way to earn money, no way to do my schoolwork. Mom turned pale, her dismissive expression replaced by a flash of genuine discomfort, but she quickly recovered, her resolve hardening. Your brother needed help, Olivia. He has an addiction. It's a disease. We had no choice but to prioritize him. And what about me? Was I just supposed to suffer in silence while you lied to everyone, while you stole from me? My voice was trembling with the force of my emotions. Dad attempted a different tactic, his voice softening, attempting to appeal to some sense of family loyalty. Olivia, please. Just tell Grandma that you've been fine this whole time. Tell her we've been supporting you properly, that it was all a misunderstanding. I stared at him, incredulous, my mouth agape. You want me to lie for you? After everything? You want me to actively participate in your deceit again? We're family, he said, as if that were the ultimate, unshakable justification for their actions. Family doesn't do what you did to me. I stood up, trembling with a righteous rage that vibrated through my entire body. I lost 20 pounds my first semester. Chloe had to lend me money for food because you starved me. There were days I was so lightheaded from hunger I couldn't concentrate in my classes. I could barely stand. Well, maybe you should have called us if things were that dire, Olivia, Dad countered, attempting to shift the blame. I did call. I begged for help. I told you I was struggling, and Mom told me to get a second job because I was being lazy and selfish. She shrieked at me. A heavy, suffocating silence descended on the room. Mom looked away, her face contorted, unable to refute the painful truth of my words. Leo is your brother, she finally said quietly, her voice barely a whisper, as if that settled everything. He needs us. And I don't. My voice cracked, tears finally brimming in my eyes, but these were angry tears, not sad ones. I have always been a secondary concern for you. Always. Leo got a car. I got a markdown bike. Leo was lauded for minimal effort. I was ignored despite working my tail off, despite achieving good grades. Leo received all your attention, all your money, all your love. What did I get? Scraps. That's not true, Dad protested feebly, his conviction wavering. Isn't it? Be honest for once in your lives. I wiped away angry tears, my voice gaining strength. You chose him over me, time and time again. You allowed me to struggle and suffer while pouring everything you had into him. And for what? Has he improved? Has all that money cured him? Has it made him a functional adult? Their silence was the only answer I needed. A damning, echoing silence. He's our son, Mom whispered, as if begging for understanding. And I'm your daughter. I yelled, the words torn from my throat. Or had you forgotten that? Had I been so insignificant you erased me from your minds? Mom began to cry, truly cry this time, hiding her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. Dad patted her shoulder awkwardly, a futile gesture. "Olivia, try to understand," he said, his voice pleading. "Leo's issues are complex. We're his parents. We can't just abandon him." I took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to regain my composure, to find my center amidst the storm. "I understand that Leo needs help," I said, my voice calmer now, but no less firm. "But you chose to help him by actively harming me, by lying to me, by stealing from me, by letting me go hungry. That was your choice. And now you have to live with the consequences." Mom looked up, mascara streaking her tear-stained face, her eyes wide with a desperate fear. "What are we supposed to do now? Leo is in trouble again. He owes money to some very dangerous people. We need Grandma's help to get him out of this." "That is not my problem," I replied, the words surprising even myself with their newfound conviction and detachment. "That is something you created. You deal with it." "How can you be so cold?" Mom asked, her voice incredulous, using the same word she had used when I had first asked about Grandma's promised money years ago. The very word that had shamed me into silence and submission back then. Something inside me fractured at those words, the last thread of filial obligation snapping. "Get out," I screamed, not caring who in the dormitory might overhear, not caring about appearances. "Get out of my room. Get out of my life. I don't want to see either of you ever again. You made your choice years ago. You picked your favorite child. Now you can deal with the fallout yourself." They left, Mom weeping dramatically and Dad looking utterly defeated, his head bowed. As the door shut behind them, clicking into place, I collapsed onto my bed, shaking uncontrollably, the adrenaline slowly draining from my body, leaving me hollowed out but strangely, powerfully free. Chloe returned an hour later, stepping cautiously into the room. She took one look at my tear-streaked, defiant face, and without a word, sat beside me on the bed, pulling me into a comforting embrace. "That bad, huh?" she whispered, stroking my hair. "Worse," I said, my voice hoarse, and proceeded to tell her everything, every raw, painful detail of the confrontation. She whistled softly, her eyes wide. "Your parents are really something else, Liv. Did they even apologize? Truly apologize?" "Not once," I said, staring at the ceiling, feeling a strange sense of clarity. "They just wanted me to persuade Grandma to change her will back, so they could get more money for Leo. Their concerns are still only for him, and for themselves." Unbelievable. Chloe squeezed my hand, her solidarity a warm current in my cold anger. "What are you going to do now?" "Move forward," I said, surprised by the conviction in my own voice, by the absolute certainty I felt. "Focus on my studies, keep my weekend job because I actually enjoy it now, and stop letting them pull me into their chaos. I'm done." Over the following weeks, I immersed myself completely in my studies. The liberation from constant financial anxiety and the relentless grind of 2 jobs was truly life-altering. I could purchase textbooks instead of relying solely on scarce library copies. I could eat 3 full, nutritious meals a day without fear, savoring each bite. I could replace my worn-out shoes and buy actual winter coats. My concentration improved exponentially, and for the first time, learning became a genuine pleasure, not a desperate scramble. My grade shot up from a respectable but unremarkable 3.1 to an impressive 3.8, and my professors were starting to take notice. "Your analysis in this paper demonstrates remarkable insight, Olivia," my psychology professor told me after class one day, a genuine smile on her face. "You have a real talent for critical thinking." Have you considered applying for the research assistant position in our department for next semester? It's a competitive but incredibly rewarding opportunity. Previously, I would have had to decline immediately, knowing I couldn't possibly spare the time or the mental energy. Now, I found myself nodding with unbridled enthusiasm. I'd love to apply, I said, a thrill running through me. When are the applications due? That evening, as I was excitedly working on my application, Chloe burst into our room, waving a brightly colored flyer like a flag. "Spring break trip to Cancun," she announced, her eyes gleaming. "A huge group of us are going. You absolutely have to come, Liv." My initial instinct, a deeply ingrained habit from when every dollar was precious and every decision was weighed against survival, was to refuse. But then I remembered I no longer had to live that way. I had choices. I had financial freedom. "You know what? I'm in," I said, a wide, genuine smile spreading across my face. Chloe's jaw dropped. "Seriously? No, I can't afford it, or I have to work?" "Nope," I grinned, tossing a pillow back at her as she playfully threw one at me. "I've been saving some of Grandma's money. I can afford a vacation. I deserve a vacation." "Who are you, and what have you done with Olivia?" she laughed, pulling me into a spontaneous dance around the room. The week before spring break, as I was packing my newfound swimsuit, I received a call from my Aunt Claire, my mom's older sister, whom I rarely spoke to. Her tone was serious, laced with a familiar note of family drama. "Olivia," she began, "I thought you should know. Your parents sold the house. They're renting a much smaller apartment now. They're struggling, Olivia. The money from the house sale barely covered Leo's debts. He got involved with some very dangerous loan sharks this time, and the situation escalated quickly. They had no choice." I felt a brief pang of something akin to sympathy, a faint echo of the old Olivia, but I quickly pushed it aside. That was their decision, their consequence to bear. "I know," I replied, my voice steady, betraying none of the complex emotions churning inside. "I'm not suggesting you should help them. I just thought you should be aware of the extent of it." She paused, then continued, her voice softer. "Leo's in a rehab facility again. An intensive inpatient program far away. Maybe this time it will be successful, Olivia. We can only hope." After we hung up, I sat on my bed, staring at the wall, thinking about my brother. Despite everything, despite the years of pain and neglect his addiction had caused, I couldn't bring myself to hate him. He was a victim of his addiction, yes, but also of our parents' enabling. They had never taught him about consequences, never forced him to face the results of his actions. They had only ever shielded him, at my expense. I called Grandma that night and told her about my conversation with Aunt Claire. "Are you okay, darling?" she asked, her voice full of concern. "Yeah, I think I am," I replied, surprised by how true it felt. "I feel sad for them, for the situation they're in, but not responsible, not guilty."
Good.
"Because you are not responsible for their choices, Olivia." Grandma's voice was firm, reassuring. "You focus on building your life, your future." And that is precisely what I did. Spring break in Cancun was everything I had never allowed myself to dream of. Endless sunshine, soft white beaches, turquoise water, and unadulterated laughter with my friends. I bought a new swimsuit without looking at the price tag, ordered whatever I desired at restaurants without a second thought, and even splurged on a thrilling parasailing adventure, soaring high above the ocean, feeling an exhilarating sense of freedom. When we returned to campus, tanned, refreshed, and revitalized, a letter was waiting for me in my mailbox. I recognized my mother's neat, looping handwriting instantly and was tempted to throw it away unopened, a visceral repulsion rising within me, but curiosity, or perhaps a lingering need for closure, got the better of me. Inside was a brief, almost clinical note. Olivia, we've moved to a smaller place. The address is below if you ever wish to visit. Leo is in rehab again. The doctors believe he might have a real chance this time if he stays with the program. Your father and I have been doing a lot of thinking. We made mistakes, significant ones. We cannot change the past, but we want you to know we're proud of you for standing on your own 2 feet. Love, Mom.
No palagi.
No acknowledgement of the depth of the pain they had caused, the years of hunger and struggle, the outright theft. Just a vague admission of mistakes and an address I had no plans to visit. I showed the letter to Chloe, who rolled her eyes dramatically. That's it? After everything. That's all she wrote? Significant mistakes. I put the letter in my desk drawer, not even bothering to discard it. Honestly, I hadn't expected even that much. It was just a further confirmation of their inability to truly understand. As the semester wore on, I found myself thinking less and less about my parents and Leo. My thoughts were consumed by my classes, my weekend job at the cafe, which I kept because I genuinely liked the atmosphere and the camaraderie with my colleagues, and my new, exciting role as a research assistant, where I was delving into fascinating psychological studies. Grandma visited again in late April, just before finals, taking me shopping for comfortable study clothes and out for a fancy dinner at a quiet Italian restaurant. "How are you really doing, darling?" she asked over a shared tiramisu. "I'm good. Really good, actually." I smiled, a genuine, radiant smile. I never knew life could be this free of complications, this full of possibilities. "That's how it's supposed to be at your age." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand, her eyes filled with warmth. "Your only job right now is to learn and grow, to explore who you are." "I got a letter from Mom," I told her, watching her reaction. Grandma's eyebrows rose slightly. "And?" "No real apology. Just an update that they've moved and Leo is in rehab again." "Are you going to respond?" I shook my head slowly.
Not now.
"Maybe someday, if they ever truly get it. But I'm not ready. I need more time. Or maybe I don't need it at all." "That's fair," Grandma nodded, her understanding a comfort. "You take all the time you need. Your peace is paramount." As final exams neared, I dedicated myself to studying with a newfound intensity. My psychology professor had suggested that if I kept my grades up, I might be eligible for a summer research stipend, an incredible opportunity that would have been utterly unthinkable before, a dream I couldn't even afford to have. One evening, as I walked back to my dorm from the library, the quiet campus illuminated by lamplight, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, a long-distance area code. I hesitated, then answered cautiously. "Hello." "Olivia?" A male voice, vaguely familiar, yet different, steadier. "It's Leo. I'm calling from the rehab center. Part of my recovery process is to make amends, and you were one of the first people I needed to reach out to." I sat down abruptly on a nearby bench, the cool metal seeping through my jeans, unsure of what to say, my heart doing a strange flutter. "I know what Mom and Dad did," he continued when I didn't respond, his voice low, filled with a raw honesty I'd never heard from him before. "Using your money for my gambling, letting you struggle. I just wanted to tell you I'm sorry, Olivia."
Profoundly sorry.
I didn't know about it at the time, not the full extent, but that doesn't make it right. Not one bit. "No, it doesn't," I agreed, my voice surprisingly calm. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness." His voice was steady, clearer than I'd ever known it to be. "I just wanted you to know that I understand what happened, I understand the pain I contributed to, and I'm truly sorry for my role in it, however indirect." After we hung up, I sat on that bench for a long time, watching students walk by. Some looked stressed with textbooks, Others were laughing with friends, others lost in their own worlds. Normal college life unfolding all around me, the life I finally had the chance to fully experience, to thrive in. I thought about Leo's call. It was the first genuine apology I had received from anyone in my immediate family. I didn't know if he would stay sober this time, if his recovery was real, or if my parents would ever truly grasp the profound harm they had inflicted. But for the first time, I understood that it didn't matter as much as it once did. My life was no longer dictated by their decisions, their failures, or their preferences. I had my own path now, one paved with opportunities, nurtured friendships, and a future limited only by my own ambitions and hard work. Whatever happened with my family, I knew, with a quiet, undeniable certainty, that I was going to be okay. I was more than okay. I was free.